After months and months of build, after controversy and discourse about what should go on last, what should go on which night, and if any of these matches should even happen, the two main matches on tonight's WrestleMania, night one, if nothing else, completely alter the landscape of at least one brand of WWE television. Tonight might not have been the greatest night of WrestleMania matches that any of us have ever seen. In fact, you can argue it was a rather mid night, all in all. But we have plenty to talk about, including what was really at stake in the main event and what was the result of the main event. What was the real result? What does this mean going forward for the future of this company? After all, nothing was officially on the line in that match, but a lot was decided. And there's a lot of questions to answer. We also have a new world champion to open up the show. How do you guys feel about that? Is it time? Was it time? Is it the right person? It's got to be time, right? It was now or never. Did the right person go over? Few other titles changed hands on this night as well. A lot of pieces of the landscape changed. Not in the women's division, though. No. The title stayed right where it was. What's up, everyone? How you doing? This is your night one WrestleMania 41 recap over here on the One True Sport YouTube channel. This is the Nocturnal Knockout. I am Rob, part of the Brass Ring Media series of podcasts right over here on the One True Sport network. And of course, as we are often doing, it is nocturnal. We are going to get knocked out. We are going to talk about all things WrestleMania Night 1. This is your official post show. We're going to break it down. This is going to be a real fun night to talk about because the two biggest things of the night to talk about happen in bookended segments. So we'll just break it down match by match. We have a lot of total WrestleMania this weekend, but not a ton of extra WrestleMania fat to talk about tonight. So it should be a nice lean show for us to break down, and there's plenty to break down here. Now, if you want to get in the conversation, breaking down everything with us, you're more than welcome. You are more than free to join this conversation on a WrestleMania Night 1 Saturday night. Go ahead and get in on the chat the way Michael is doing. What's up, Mike? Glad you had your coffee. I didn't have my coffee because I won't wake up tomorrow morning. What's up, Valentin? Yeah, tons going on. I don't know what the hell the Timberwolves are doing, shooting the lights out. I don't know why Russell Westbrook saved a playoff game earlier today. I don't know what's going on in the world. We've got a lot going on. And E, I was thinking about you when I'm watching the NXT show. You were top of my mind this morning as I was sipping my coffee watching NXT. What's up, everyone? Happy WrestleMania Day. How you feeling? How you feeling after that night one of WrestleMania? This was a different night one of WrestleMania than we've had the last couple of years. The last couple of years, the two nights of WrestleMania have felt so intrinsically linked together. 2 years ago, you had the double main event of Bloodline Consequence with Kevin and Sami taking on the Usos in the main event. Last year, you had a match that had a direct payoff to the main event the next night with The Rock and Roman Reigns taking on Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. For all intents and purposes, although more to be seen tomorrow night, tonight's night one of WrestleMania was a self-contained night. So it had a lot of pressure to live up to. Now, you guys tell me. This is what you guys need to do in the chat. You guys need to let me know. Did it live up to that pressure? What's your overall thoughts and opinions of night one? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle. Real curious to hear what you guys think of tonight's show. I tried going on Reddit earlier to gauge how you guys were feeling and how the general public was feeling about everything. And it was so much split down the middle, I felt like, throughout the response. And I think this was overall probably a thumbs up night. But if you take off that main event, I wonder what that rating would actually look like. Jay's been celebrating on the post show. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I know the post show is going on. Cut into it because, after all, we got to get to bed. We have another night to do this tomorrow night. But if anything breaks on the post show, any press conferences, any hot takes, please get them in on the chat. And if you're feeling really generous on a Saturday night, you can send one of them beloved super chats. Lord knows we can use some of those in this economy for sure. Let me crack open. No beer tonight. We'll take a ginger ale. Shout out to Ashley. What's up, Azan? Yeah, you enjoyed Penn and Teller this morning? They're looking a little weathered. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, you've been out of that early. I did start watching the NXT show, but I wasn't watching it that closely. My son was more into it, and I was watching it kind of off for the side. I was really into the women's match. That's what I was hanging around for. Yeah, and Valentin, that's the other thing. In the context of everything we have night one of WrestleMania going on, and all the bigness that entitles, and all the announcements. And about an hour before the show goes on air, we get an announcement that WWE now owns AAA. Just like that. And already tonight, we had Triple H influence on the show as we had Vikingo getting involved in one of the matches. That's huge, Valentin. And I haven't even really had the chance to fully digest what that means. But when you talk about this idea of a global takeover of WWE, something they've been talking about forever, and we've heard for years that they're going to build up these little posts in Japan, or Mexico is the other one we've always heard about specifically. You hear about all these things, and the NXT UK situation seemed to be the closest that WWE was ever really successful in launching a like satellite brand or satellite developmental or anything like that. Obviously, they're very big globally, but a lot of that has to do with them expanding their own brand. This is a completely different way of just doing what they do, basically stateside, which is for lack of a better term, the colonization of their competition, where they go into the territories and they simply absorb and take over the territories. To your question, yeah, I've assumed the whole time that just like it was with a lot of those UK promotions, the idea was to get NXT sort of in the fold, and eventually they would be purchased as well. And I have a feeling that this is exactly what this is. What's to say that they don't start making moves towards other larger foreign promotions? Now, it's not as easy as just writing a check. There's a lot more to that, and I think there will have to be a little bit more partnerships than the direct ownership. But this is a way for WWE to really penetrate globally, using, really, in my opinion, the same model that they tend to use stateside. And yeah, I don't know if Alberto Del Rio's time in AAA will last very much longer, but we'll see. We'll see on that. Let's break down WrestleMania, shall we? Let's start from the main event and go to the opening match, because there's nothing on here that's really that much of a downer anyway. So I think this is all highlights for us to talk about, and we have plenty to talk about. So let's get into it. As alluded to at the top of the show, our main event featured a triple threat match between the likes of Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and CM Punk. With nothing really on the line, the only thing that was ever at stake in this match was the services of Paul Heyman, which shifted in the build to this match. obviously for the last 5+ years, Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns have been thick as thieves. One little split leading into a WrestleMania a couple of years ago, but not to worry about that, right? All was good in the hood with these guys. All it took was one favor from CM Punk, though, and the relationship was down the toilet. So you knew that would play into this match. Take it from the top, though, with all of that context. You had Seth Rollins coming out with a flamethrower. Every man's dream, according to Pat McAfee. Now, he had the flamethrower, and then he had like the trash bag over him. So he knew he was going to have on one of his signature outfits underneath it after he got done with the flamethrower. And he took it off and to have that nice white outfit on him. Roman Reigns was out next. He had a pretty cool attire on himself with the white gloves, the white shoes on there, looking like he was ready for a prize fight. I thought that was really cool. And then we had the main eventer himself, Phil CM Punk Brooks, making his entrance, his WrestleMania main event debut. And I got to say, I know it's really cool when you have a live band play you out, especially the band that plays the song, the theme song that people are so used to hearing and chanting along to. And I will say, Cult of Personality is one of the most iconic themes in wrestling over the past 15 or so years for a couple of reasons. One, it's a piece of popular music, and that always gets over just a little bit more than some of the generic stuff they use or some of the awful music that WWE has had over the last couple of years. Beyond that, unlike many, many, many wrestlers, Punk was able to take that theme with him because it's something that really supersedes him and is outside of WWE. So he was able to have that when he wrestled in AEW and became so much a part of his identity. And that opening guitar riff is, if nothing else, just such an iconic part of the symbolism and the Pavlovian response of this is CM Punk. It's CM Punk time. And I love Living Color. Great band. Have been for years. Still on the road after 35 years. But holy hell, was that a much worse way to intro CM Punk, was having Living Color singing the song. And not so much the singing, it's really the guitar parts, but didn't quite have the same momentous feel to it. With that said, the entrance was pretty awesome in some other ways, as you had Heyman completely hamming it up, doing his thing with the air guitar. All of that was great. I'm pretty sure that ham up, though, is all you needed to know that Heyman was definitely switching allegiances on this night. He was laying it on way too thick after acting like he's been so conflicted in the lead up to this, and he's just doing this favor because it's what he promised he would do. Then suddenly he's all in and so enthusiastic. Yeah, I did like that part about that, and I forgot about that, and I should mention that. So, and Azan is asking, and I'm referring to you, Michael, and Azan is asking, does Punk get more main events, or is this it? I think it's pretty likely because WrestleMania now has 2 nights that he does get another main event. His in-ring segments with the guys in tomorrow night's main events were something that the audience was definitely into. And so if they want to reset those for future main events, obviously you couldn't do it with Cena, but if you want to do something with Cody, I think that's on the table. I do think, though, this was one of his best shots at it, and he's as hot as he's been this last year. What are the odds that he keeps that going forward? I don't know, but we'll see. But as Michael mentioned, the promo package was kind of cool that they laid out with CM Punk, where he talks about the straight edge mantra, but his addiction being wrestling, and interspersed with the OVW, ECW shots, of course, leaning heavily on that's where the Heyman is, with interspersed with the modern grizzled CM Punk. That CM Punk against the OVW CM Punk was a really, really cool touch, though, I thought. And then he made his entrance. Him and Roman both getting a big amount of cheers. in this match as you thought they would. These are three people that obviously the crowd is really invested in, even if the build to this match has been a bit of a quagmire coming in. Now, the match itself, I will say before we get into the specifics, I thought was unquestionably the match of the night. There was a lot of pretty good wrestling on this show, but until the main event, none of it really felt like WrestleMania to me. All of it felt just like pretty good wrestling that was going on. It was it was in this presentation of this main event where for the first time I felt like it was really WrestleMania weekend, with the way they presented it and the pacing that they had. There really is becoming a modern WWE style, which is different than like a strong style in New Japan, AEW, any of that stuff. It is its own unique style for these big matches. And unlike in the past, at least when this style just meant like the slow Triple H style, that's what we meant when we said WWE style. I think their modern style main events, although a little overwrought at times, is fairly entertaining. So the match actually starts with Punk and Heyman hanging outside of the ring. Again, Punk really hamming it up on the advice, just getting the daggers stared through him by Roman especially. And then Roman starts the match by going right after Seth, and we're off to the races. We get a big, long walk and brawl segment with Punk and Seth, and they didn't quite overstay their welcome, but these are not the most entertaining parts of matches. And that is one part I will say early on where I thought this match drug a little bit in the early parts is that before it really started heating up to the finishing sequences and the near falls and all the really good stuff that really made this match interesting, it took on the WWE triple threat trope of having a bunch of one-on-one matches essentially happening within a match. As there was the long period of, in this case, Seth and Punk, and they're fighting outside of the ring. It was broken up pretty cool as they were fighting back to the barricade. All of a sudden, Roman just flies into the other side, into where the fans were, into where Seth and Punk were. It was amazing the way Roman was able to fly. Roman's agile, athletic ability is not something we celebrate as much as we probably should. With all of that said, the match really picked up when we got this spot that we often get in big title matches that include Seth versus Roman, and it's the spear into the pedigree spot, which is always a pretty cool spot. And I think the time that it was most iconic would be at the Money in the Bank pay per view, the one coming off of WrestleMania 32, going into the wellness violation of Roman Reigns, the night that you had all three Shield guys holding the title on the same night. They used that spot in that match. I think that's what actually led to the fall and the finish. And I thought that was a really engaging move that led into the stomp spot right here. And that is the moment where the crowd was excited because of who they had, and there was the main event, and they were not too tired from everything else they had on this night. But that was the moment where this turned into a pretty entertaining main event, to one that was really engaging and started to have you at the edge of your seat. So there's a point where Seth is pleading with Roman, telling him that they must take out Punk, that he's such a big evil and everything he does, that he doesn't belong. Roman has his torn look in his eyes for a few minutes, and then cheers on Seth, only to slap the hell out of him. Lots of good slaps in this match. It's a good slappy match. Eventually, both Punk and Seth go through the new announce tables. Now, this was going to be a big point of contention for me. As we've noted, in the Triple H era, the announce tables just don't break. Again, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know why he's paying for better tables than Vince used to pay for. I don't know what's going on. But one of the innovations of tonight, and I got to say, tonight's set looked amazing. I thought the Allegiant looked great. Not a lot of frills with the set, but with so many people packed in, I think they just really knew how to make it look cool for a wrestling arena, specifically the way that it was lit. But they got these new fancy announce tables which ended up breaking. Both of them ended up breaking with each one of Roman's opponents. So I am proud of those tables that we now have breakable announce tables. And we also didn't get any table breaks till the main event. So we didn't really have any reason to test these out just yet. I saw empty seats on a lot in the I didn't snap to that, Mike. I saw empty seats initially when they first cut, like when they were doing the opening package. It looked like maybe everyone wasn't filed in, but it looked like in that upper level too, those were like really rich people seats, that there were some empty seats right in there. But I mean, it was a pretty full room. Roman does bust out his guillotine spot on Punk. Punk reverses that into an anaconda vice. And then Seth gets Punk into a sharpshooter. Eventually, Roman gets Seth into the guillotine. Seth with some reversals out of that. Punk ends up breaking everything up. A GTS to Seth, but Seth kicks out. And Punk hits Seth with that GTS, and then he eats the spear, but then Seth takes away Roman in that moment. You had like all three with the impromptu stomp, all three finishers, and that's when we get to the moment. After all of that chaos happens, they're all just hitting their moves. No one can break through. No one can win, and that's where we get the turning points of the match. Paul Heyman, he's out there with the chair, and you have the moment where they're both laid out. Roman and Punk are laid out on the canvas, stomachs on the ground. Who is going to be bestowed this magic chair by Paul Heyman? Heyman looks torn, but he eventually slips it to Punk. Punk is the happiest guy in the world to have this chair, and he's about to lay into Roman Reigns. But just as he's about to, bam, comes the low blow from Paul Heyman. It was all for naught. It was all a ruse. I guess they've been together all along, or at least Paul Heyman found the light, something to that effect. And now Roman Reigns is doing his best to just take out CM Punk with the chair. Look at that. It's Vince at Austin. It's WrestleMania 17. And then it comes time to take out Seth Rollins. And you know the history of Rollins and Reigns and chair shots. There's a lot of baggage there. Well, there's even more baggage after tonight, as the same exact spot that Heyman did with Roman to Punk, Heyman does with Roman on Roman, and hits him with a low blow, putting Seth in a position to eat the chair to the back, as he tends to do from Seth Rollins, eat a stomp, take the pin. There you go. The main event of night one of WrestleMania has Seth Rollins pinning Roman Reigns, walking out with Paul Heyman. And that was that. So nothing actually on the line in the match. Leading up to the match, the one piece of storyline drama was whose side that Paul Heyman would be on, CM Punk or Roman Reigns. And in the end, he walked out with Seth Rollins. A few things at play here. If you take issue with predictability, I think you're probably pretty disappointed in that main event. I think projecting Seth to go with Paul Heyman is something that, if you opened up your phone anytime in the last few weeks, was something that people were predicting pretty heavily. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, and maybe still am not, from just a reaction to what's happening on the screen perspective. But it was something I think they telegraphed pretty far out. Basically, when this thing became about whose side is who going to be on, the one person who wasn't included in any of this but was sort of the driving catalyst of this match and of this match being the way it was going to be. You started putting two and two together and figured that this is the way that it might go. And you didn't really know how they were going to get there. And I don't think how they got there tonight was all that important, although I thought it was well done. The actual specifics weren't that important, but this is what it was. And there's a few things at play here. In terms of Punk and Heyman, yes, this extends the storyline with all of them. With Roman Reigns, you have unfinished business. Obviously, you have the stuff with Paul Heyman, and you have more and more baggage, more and more fuel to this eternal feud, this perma feud that Punk and Rollins are engaged with. But despite the prominence of Punk with Heyman coming into this match, it's not like Punk and Heyman have been this storyline juggernaut for the last few years on WWE television. The main partnership, or the main focus of Paul Heyman's WWE tenure since 2020 has been on Roman Reigns. That's where the equity is. That's where that matters. That's where any of that matters. So if there is a focus on the Paul Heyman stuff, my sense is he betrayed them both, but the deeper wound should actually be with Roman Reigns more so than CM Punk. Let's read some of your comments here. Azan said Seth was the MVP of the whole build. Valentin says, overall, I like the match. I don't know how much sense Heyman's turn would make in a longer run, but that WrestleMania, they had to do something in the end or to be kind of bland. I mean, that was for sure. And Michael threw in there. So now they have Raw in the next 48 hours to explain Rollins and Heyman. And they're going to have to do a little bit of explanation for sure. Although I think it may be just this idea of maybe betting on a horse, but if that's the case, I don't think Seth is the horse you would bet on. And as far as owing the favor to Seth, Azan, to your comment there, I don't think what was owed to him from that lack of the stomp, I don't think that would outweigh the kayfabe or otherwise real friendships that he has with the other two competitors. So I don't love that necessarily as an explanation. So the fullness of the explanation, I think, is a little more difficult. I think that's going to be a little harder for them to square. Looking at the end result, though, we have to examine this holistically, I think, based on every individual in the match and where they go. In terms of CM Punk, who would seem to have to carry the most like traditional babyface heat going into this, he felt like the biggest afterthought, I think, when the match was over, just because all of this really is a continuation of this storyline from last year's WrestleMania, which was a bigger continuation of a storyline that's been going all the way since 2014. A time, when Punk really wasn't around for all of that. So there's parts of this that it feels like he is a little bit squeezed out on. With that said, in terms of WWE, I would say these last few months, ever since the Drew McIntyre feud, was as naturally over as a babyface as CM Punk has ever been in that company. And that includes his 2011 Money in the Bank. That was more about the controversial, cool things that he was doing. This is like him being genuinely over as a babyface for the first time. And then I think but I think the build to this match had the potential, though, to really stop his momentum. And it didn't quite do that, but this outcome definitely could. Is his focus going to be Seth Rollins going forward? Because both men in this match seem to have a bit of a gripe at Seth Rollins. But as was mentioned by E, and he said, what's next for Punk? Roman going to Hollywood a lot more, going to do a lot more than he was. Even if he's not going to Hollywood, which he did mention in that interview, that his time in wrestling seems to be limited going forward, it would seem that Punk would be the one that'd be around. I don't know what Punk's schedule looks like, but it seems like when he's not injured, he's basically around all the time on WWE television. He may miss a week here or there, and is not super, super frequent, but no one really is. at this point. So you would think that Punk's focus would be that. I'm sure there will be a program or two, but af- but after a while, what do you do? How long can this go on? Because you guys have been feuding for over a year, and I know Triple H loves his long-term storytelling. He loves stuff to pay off over years and years. But do you still want to be stuck in this storyline? Do you do you want to progress and match these guys up with the rest of the roster? I would think you would, depending on how you feel about Roman Reigns. And I think the crowd, he has been a face. I don't think he has necessarily been presented as a face. Where does that leave Punk now on the babyface side in terms of where he's at? Because there's times where he seems like the biggest babyface in the company, who's not a champion. Can he maintain that now that we've gone through the WrestleMania cycle? Is he going to have to make himself sparse to maintain his specialness? If and I'm not against Punk and Seth on a short term thing, but the match has to be like a hardcore match or something like that. It's just been going on so long that I think, as I'm going to allude to, there's other parts that can use these guys. Now with Roman Reigns, it's it feels like this is actually the first night of wrestling that Roman Reigns has had since last year's WrestleMania. He hasn't really done a lot in a year. The character had no progression. It seems like Roman was just there to sort of phone it in, super over. But he's there to get the pop, to do the Roman thing, almost like a touring band who is showing what they used to be, but hadn't had the title, hadn't had a lot of focus, as you're noting, Michael, and hasn't won a lot of matches at WrestleMania lately. I think from a character perspective, that is potentially very, very interesting. In many ways, the Roman Reigns arc is like WWE's way, I think, of doing Starcade 97, but doing it right. I know that was referenced on SmackDown last night, so maybe that's why that's on the brain. But it's a bit of that where you had a storyline that went on, I think, a year longer than many expected, but it had a great payoff, unlike the Starcade. But at the end of Starcade, if it's done right, and if I'm losing you guys, I'm sorry. It's late at night. You're a hardcore wrestling fan. You should know what I'm talking about when I say Starcade 97. I think the most interesting thing coming out of something like Starcade 97 was, where does Hogan go now that, the NWO is not necessarily with the same level of power and all that, like his man without a country, where he would be. I think that could potentially be very interesting to Roman Reigns, because the entirety of the bloodline, or such a big part of the bloodline, has, or no, yeah, the entirety. It started with the connection to Heyman. Heyman is such a big part of it. Jey Uso was a big part of it. Those people are all in different positions than they were before. Point being is, we do need to see still the redemption of Roman Reigns. I know the fans accepted him and he's been a babyface, but there's been no real like journey back to where he goes, where his career, what to make out of his career. It's almost as if the Cody loss to the character didn't really matter in the way that they brought him back and had him teaming with Cody. And I was okay with that and how they justified that from a storyline standpoint. But I think, again, the character itself never really moved on from that loss and had been just stuck in that kind of mud. This gives it a chance, if they're able to progress the storyline forward, to make a more dynamic babyface or tweener character out of Roman Reigns. So assuming that this triple threat was going to be the end of the three people's beasts with one another, and then Heyman's involvement happened. And I think, and I'm going to get to that when we talk about Seth, is I actually think the rest of particularly the Raw roster, can use a rub from these three guys as well. They've been so stuck in this intertwined mess that they've been in from the build. Mike does point out a difference as Sting being the man facing the big bag at NWO, where this is this like post dissolved bloodline. Which, to be fair, we never really got to dissolved NWO. That was the thing. Valentin says, I guess Seth beat Jay and we could have a big title match, Seth versus Roman on SummerSlam. RVD is top Mania streak 4-0. Some people got 1 or 2. Unfortunately, RVD had ankle injury a couple weeks ago. So that's the remaining. There's another one too. I think one of the Demolition guys has a pretty big streak going. We got to keep that intact. And then there's Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins did not come out of WrestleMania Night 1 as the new champion, but he kind of feels like he did, didn't he? Kind of feels like Seth is a little bit more of a top guy now than he's been in several years. And if they want to maintain that, they need to actually book him like a top guy for the first time ever. Seth has always been in a weird spot in his career. That he seems to be booked well or booked strong or gets really, really over whenever he's out of the spotlight. Whenever you're told he's a top guy, when he's presented as a top guy, whenever he has top titles, they tend to book him as a joke and you take him less seriously and you run cold on him. Now, I don't think anyone was that into Seth since last year's WrestleMania. Obviously, he played a huge part in that WrestleMania, but he also played a huge part in the build and parts of the build of last year's WrestleMania, feeling just a little off and just a little awkward. And honestly, even though he played such a big part in the execution of last year's really entertaining WrestleMania main events, he's another guy that in the year since he's had the feuds of Punk, but not a lot of it has been of extreme intrigue. Another guy that I don't think that they quite moved on from last year's WrestleMania. Now, he was very hurt going into all that, so he had to miss a lot of time. As Michael mentioned, a decade ago, he was on top with the cash-in, and he lost every week on the show. Remember that? He was not taken seriously when he had the briefcase, nor was he taken seriously when he had the title. And maybe that was his chicken shit heel era, and he's still a bit of that. But we're in an era, let's face it, where the top guys are Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Roman Reigns. They are presented in a completely different way than this version of Seth Rollins had been presented for the last couple of years. Now, this recent version of Seth Rollins, I will say, was an improvement on a lot of other versions of Seth Rollins. I talked about how weak he was booked as Money in the Bank and as the champ. But if you recall, after the long injury around WrestleMania 32, when he came back, there was something off about him. You remember his match with Triple H didn't quite have the sting that he always had. It wasn't really until a little bit before WrestleMania 35 that he sort of regained his aura about him, only to completely have it undone by feuding for months and months with Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans. And then The Fiend kind of put that completely out of its misery. Since that era, though, you had like the Monday Night Messiah, you had all of that stuff, and you had him leading those factions. And while some of that stuff could be really entertaining, a lot of it just felt like it sucked a lot of the show. And it took up a lot of attention on the show and wasn't of that high of quality. This more recent character with the big fashion statements and all that, I think has been a more effective version of the Seth character, but it's gone on for a while. And it's a little stale. And it's not necessarily booked very well. And you add all of those things up, and in my opinion, Seth Rollins has felt like just a hair below everyone else. The Cody Rhodes, the CM Punks, the Roman Reigns, the John Cenas, even the Drew McIntyres, everyone that feels like they're at that upper tier of the roster. It felt like Seth has felt just a little bit below that, just slightly below that. And so I think now, if he's going to be in this newly christened position as the Heyman guy, as that sort of the top guy with or without the title, they're going to have to refocus on the way that they book him. They can't book him like they did 10 years ago. I think they'll have to take him serious in some ways. He can't just be the Miz, but in the main event. And that's essentially what he was on that initial main event run. One thing that definitely I think can help him is promos. he's reverted back in recent months into just giving ungodly long promos. Now, part of that was the storyline for this match was not the best, and he had to give some explanations and cut these promos about why these other guys aren't here. So I don't want to put that all on him. However, if someone is not the best on promos or needs to pick their spots, Paul Heyman is the perfect guy to pair someone with who struggles with promos. The thing is, Seth's not bad at promos. They just go on for a really, really, really long time, and they can kind of drag down the show. And anytime he's a focus of any shows, the shows he's on tend to get drugged down by his Triple H-ish promos that he cuts on there. Now, I've been talking nonstop for 41 minutes, so who the hell am I to say anything? But it is what it is. And so, with all of that I said about the criticisms of Seth's character, Paul Heyman can be a guy to rehabilitate a lot of those things. Now, Paul Heyman doesn't have the Midas touch. For every Roman Reigns and CM Punk and Brock Lesnar there's a Curtis Axel, there's a Nathan Jones in there. Obviously, Cesaro maybe. Seth is not any of those guys. And with the right amount of focus and attention, I think they can make some progress with a character that I think has been languishing for many, many years. Now, what they do with that character, I think needs to focus not just on these legacy matches, but actually on the gold, specifically on the gold on the Raw brand. I think that's going to be something that he's going to have to focus on and may have to hold very, very soon in order for all of this to come together. More on that later, though. So some updates here on the press conference and AAA World Collides. Triple H talking about making NXT AAA as Triple H talking about making AAA. That's not going to get redundant as making it an NXT Mexico. I think that's generally the deal as they create these basically developmental territories across the globe. That would be cool. I just don't know that they would present it on their television as those companies being of equals the way they did with like NXT, SmackDown, and Raw. All right, let's move on from the triple threat. Let's talk about the top singles match on this night in terms of at least match order. And that was your women's WWE Championship match with Tiffany Stratton defending against Charlotte Flair. This match was one of the more talked about matches coming into this show, not because of the quality of the build and the anticipation for the physicality here. No, it was about like the shoot comments they were making and how much of a train wreck it was every week on SmackDown. So I talked about the main event having pressure, but those are all kind of made guys in the main event. This match had a lot of pressure, I think, to deliver as well because of what a train wreck the build had been, and with the experience, and I think just overall the experience gap between Tiffany and Charlotte and how that was presented. I disagree with that entirely, because if I would have done picks, I would have had Charlotte winning this, just because. Something I did think was a little weird. Tiffany was out first, and we've seen it before where the champion doesn't come out first, which is usually a sign that they're not going to win. But this was actually odd because I think Tiffany's entrance was a little bit more elaborate than Charlotte's. They both got a bit of an extra entrance. Tiffany came out in like the Barbie playhouse with all the other like Tiffany looking Barbies next to her. And then you had Charlotte pulling up in a Rolls Royce, similar to the way LA Knight will pull up earlier in the night, but I guess LA Knight came up from the babyface side and Charlotte came from the heel side. Charlotte herself has had much more elaborate entrances at WrestleMania, and I thought that Tiffany's entrance was just a little bit better. So I was shocked that they actually positioned it that way. This match was fine, but boy, it was boring and clunky till the very end. And even at that very end, it was still clunky and sloppy. But I thought it was pretty enjoyable at the end. And I think the booking in terms of the finish that they booked on it actually saved this thing. And so while I think from an in-ring perspective, this might have been the low point of the night, it was not the disaster that was and possibly anticipated coming in based on the promo, or just based on the quality of the competitors. So as I said, the match took on a very slow tone early on. It was a lot of Charlotte on offense. And again, it was fine, but boring. And as you went through the finishing sequence, and again, everything was kind of falling apart. Eventually, Tiffany gets up there with uh, the prettiest moonsault ever, gets the pin, gets up. If one thing that Tiffany likes to market, it's her face and her appearance. Well, that face looked pretty rough when she stood up. She had a chipped or broken tooth. Her lip was bloody. As Austin said, you talk about hard hitting. Yeah, this was hard hitting. Charlotte kicked Tiffany in the face several times. I want to say that's where these came from, but they could come from other spots. I don't know. But yeah, she definitely made her earn this. And like I said, it was ugly and boring at times. But Tiffany winning was, I think, the right call and basically salvaged this. It wasn't a train wreck, but it wasn't exciting. But had Charlotte have won the match, I think it would have been so groan inducing. And this match would have felt like it was so much worse. I don't think this match was good. I have seen some people praising it, and I think some people like this match, and that is fine. My personal opinion, it wasn't the greatest match. That finish, though, made it okay. The finish made it tolerable. I didn't watch that Hall of Fame last night. I kept waking up in the middle of the night and just going through like my YouTube app, trying to find something on the background, like an old podcast to watch something I had to wake up early to doze me off. And the Hall of Fame was just still streaming every time my eyes opened. I think so. I think this can be, Austin. We have to look at Charlotte's WrestleMania record. Is she getting to the spot where it's kind of like a Triple H thing where like, oh, they actually lose every year at WrestleMania, even though they have the reputation of never losing. So then when they do take the losses at a WrestleMania, it starts feeling bigger, where that's sort of the point of putting them in those matches. This seemed like a hell of an endorsement of Tiffany. Not a lot of people get the wins over Charlotte. Even Rhea Ripley, right? She had to go on a whole cycle of a few years to get it back and to get her win back. This to me was that endorsement that I think they didn't give to her in the build, unfortunately, which made this a lot tougher for her and for for everyone involved, because of the way they positioned her. Her and Jay both, I thought, had this where they positioned them so far below who their opponent was that it almost made like their victories were going to seem like flukes or something like that. And that's not how this match played out, and that's not how it completely played out, but they definitely ran that risk going in. But but then putting her over like that, putting it over clean, as long as they don't get bogged down in this, I think it can be a very important win. I don't think it's that bad of a match, but Steve Austin hates his match at WrestleMania 14 with Shawn Michaels. Sometimes the match isn't as important as the result of what happened and how it happened. Now, I do not think that Tiffany Stratton is going to turn into Stone Cold Steve Austin circa 1998 coming off of this match. No. But I do think it was a hell of an endorsement of her. And as I said, as long as she doesn't stay feuding with Charlotte for another 3 months and she can move on to something and actually a true feud, not be on the side of Nia, off to the side, not be so fluky, not be caught in these weird worked shoot, talking over each other's segments, not just being the tag partner of Trish Stratus. I mean, an actual program. She seems to be a top baby face now. The crowd does want to cheer her whenever her segments don't just fall off a cliff. I think it's no pun intended, but it can be Tiffy time if you want it to be. Thank God this program hopefully is over though, because it was really bringing down such a hot commodity. And I guess Charlotte will be fine. She should just go get involved in the other triple threat. They should make it a fatal 4-way tomorrow night and have Charlotte win and just break everybody's brain. That'd break your guys' brain, right? It'd break mine. Do you guys have throw this in the chat? Any contenders for Tiffany off the bat if she is to move on from Charlotte? Michael said Charlotte's been overexposed. The he has just win the Royal Rumble very bad. Austin notes that was surprised to be too. Tiffany beat Charlotte in match one. Normally Charlotte wins match one. Yeah. Charlotte has the Triple H thing where she puts the other person over on the show that it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, she'll eat the pin on the Backlash show, but when it comes to WrestleMania, nah. We'll see what's going on with Bayley. That was my pick going into yesterday, that needed to be the proper feud. We'll see how things are playing out. Charlotte moving down the card. She is still hungry for the women's U.S. title. Heaven forbid the women's tag team title. I think she could benefit some of those divisions, though. I don't think having her around would be the worst thing if she was booked in a proper way. I hope it's not Tiffy versus Nia Austin. I do not think that's the direction to go. But who knows? I could be wrong, and I ain't booking the thing. Prior to Tiffany Stratton and Charlotte Flair, HBK came out to announce the attendance. There was a Hall of Fame entrance in there somewhere. But let's just say the Hall of Fame didn't happen this year. I'm going to say that. Hall of Fame didn't happen this year. Michael's throwing out Tiffany versus Naomi. Not sure about that coming off of a loss. And then I guess on the flip side of that, he suggests Jade. Those are all possibilities. Yeah. Women's roster still, it's better than we think it is sometimes, but can still be thin when you think of who's actually around there and who would make sense and who's not doing other things. So unfortunately, this WrestleMania is marred by a bunch of impromptu matches that have to be announced on the day before or the day of because of injuries and other situations. Today's match, and we knew about this pretty late last night, that at least something might change because you had an injury last night on SmackDown to Rey Mysterio. Glad you got clean, Mike. So you couldn't have Rey Mysterio. You'll just get another Rey. And in this case, it was Rey Fenix. And that's a hell of a replacement. It's only been a few weeks since Fenix has been in the company. We haven't seen a lot of them. So this was a great showcase for Fenix against El Grande Americano. Before the match even got going, though, Vikingo put a boot in the side of Americano's head as he was taunting Vikingo on the side. This is where on the show, although it was all over social media and on their social medias earlier in the day, this is where on the show they announced the AAA partnership officially. The highlight, I think, of the actual match, though, was the 450 or further splash that El Grande Americano hit in this match. I mean, he just flipped. He just did all kinds of flips till he eventually landed on Fenix. But eventually, you know where this was leading. And I've seen this on Twitter a little bit. I think it's probably pretty accurate. They basically just went with everything they were going to do with Rey. They just, as E said, they subbed a Rey with a Rey. Hey, not the worst not the worst sub if you get the translation. But I think they went through with the same basic match. I don't think they would have quite booked this exactly for Phoenix the way they did if they had time to do so. But the loaded mask comes in, and there was 3 spots with a loaded mask. You had the kick to his head, which hurt Phoenix, and eventually led to an ankle lock. Well, I don't know if for sure he got him on the ankle lock of the same one he was selling on, but those things happen. And then there was like a flying headbutt spot, or where Phoenix was flying on him, and you got a quick headbutt by Americano, and then you had the loaded headbutt to get the win. After the match, you had Vikingo assisting Phoenix, helping him stand up. Lucha Underground stuff where they did the border stuff would have been hilarious if Grand Americano was there. Yeah, Lucha Underground is getting more and more incorporated seemingly into WWE canon, which is just hilarious. But this match, I'm not going to judge it too harshly because it was such an impromptu match, and it was only announced like 2 weeks ago anyway. So it's not like we lost a whole lot on this. I think it's kind of a no harm, no foul situation. Although that was the beginning of the inclusion of the Triple H or Triple A, not the game. That was the incorporation of that stuff onto the show. So if anything, this was a little bit of the breather match. Something that was not a breather match was the U.S. title match. LA Knight, the U.S. champion, taking on Jacob Fatu. They all got a bit of an entrance here. Jacob coming out with the werewolf mask, as he is. And LA Knight coming up with the car. But again, on the baby face side of the entrance. Not where Charlotte came in. He came in on the other side. And both these guys, the crowd was pretty into. LA Knight has a really cool entrance, even if he's not always the hottest guy on the show. Once he starts doing that entrance and the way he came out and the yas and everything, it was just you were into it. And Michael saying that's his match of the night. I would put that with the main event, but this until the main event, this was the match of the night, and this was the high point of the show. I think until the main event. Specifically, you had the moonsault into the BFT spot. That spot got a hell of a reaction. And this, LA Knight's not the biggest guy, but if you're gonna have a Fatu match at WrestleMania, you want 2 dudes kind of beating the hell out of each other, and that's what this was. It took 2 moonsaults for Jacob to get the win here. That seemed to be a theme on the finishes of tonight, that you need multiple of the same finishers over and over again, especially with like these splash or these diving spots. That seemed to be a real point of emphasis tonight. And Jacob got the win. Huge reaction for Jacob's win. They need to keep this man as far away from Solo Sikoa as possible, because if he's not involved in any of that storyline or any of that stuff, sky is the limit for Jacob. Jacob is awesome. And I even talk about Solo, the way he has just sort of stole that thunder. And again, the bloodline storyline, there's not a lot of juice left to squeeze out of that. None of that. And Solo was fine. Excuse me. Jacob is fine. Jacob's got himself some gold now. I'm hoping this turns into a really, really good run, a meaningful run that he can have as a bit of a trial. There's going to be a day with Braun Breaker, Jacob Fatu, and these guys, and some other guys that are in the mix right around that level now of these mid-card titles. They're going to be main eventing WrestleMania in a couple of years. So get used to these guys at this part. But this was not that what came before it was bad, but this was a nice moment, a bit of a palate cleanser of the night, of just the high energy and the big win. So we'll see where they go from here, but this was just a nice refresher. Yeah, LA Knight and Jacob Fatu definitely not mortal. They're referencing his past on this broadcast as well. It's really, really well done presentation in that match. Not a whole lot to say there. Our third match of the night, one of the big grudge matches on the card, featured Jade Cargill versus Naomi. And we know the storyline going into this has been fairly simple. Naomi tried to kill Jade a few months ago, and ever since then, ever since revealing that it was Naomi, Jade's been back and just killing Naomi. Now, this was what I thought a pretty basic match, but unlike a lot of these exact scenarios, back when Jade was in AEW, where she had some good feuds and she was really, really over, but her wrestling would hold her back. And sometimes these feuds and these angles would stall because she couldn't necessarily deliver in the ring. This was not a 5-star classic, maybe not even a 3-star classic, but this was just a pretty good match between these two ladies who I think had a ton of pressure on them because there was a lot of hype into this storyline, and two characters again that have always been pretty over. Naomi for years and Jade for the short time that we have known her, but neither one of these ladies are known necessarily for their in-ring acumen. They're more spectacular than the work the match type. But I thought both of these women put in everything that they had and had a very decent match. Again, this wasn't blow away, didn't knock anyone's socks off, but it was fine. It's what it needed to be. I'm kind of glad it wasn't a squash because that would have just made this a little bit, I think, kind of redundant. I think at that point, you're basically just doing Ivory and China from WrestleMania 17, and it's just the same note over and over again. So I like that they turned this into an actual match. Yeah, both these ladies, to your point there, both these ladies were struggling with their outfit during this match. And that, if there was one thing that was really taken away from this match, is that both of them were just having to readjust their tops the entire time. It slowed them down just a little bit. You guys back on the U.S. title thing, catching up with that in the chat. You guys having a Super Cena going up against these U.S. title guys. That's interesting. Don't know if it's going to happen. Actually, don't think it's going to happen because of space and time. I got to say, though, with the Jade and Naomi stuff, the storyline has to kind of be over. We got to see what happens tomorrow night with Bianca and her match, but the storyline, it's been intense. There's been lots of twists and turns. You had other characters like Bianca involved. I'm ready to see Jade go after one of those secondary titles now, though. Let's see if she can do it. Let's see if she can carry matches. Let's see where she's at. She's been put in a good spot. She's extremely over. She doesn't have to sell very much. It's not really in her character. Let's see what we can do with a female character like this on the undercard side of these. I still don't think she's quite ready for the main event part, and it's unfortunate in the women's division because there's just the secondary titles, the main event, and then the tag, which really seems to be like the lower card. You think Naomi's getting involved tomorrow night, E? Could be. Not so sure about that, but I can see it happening. Yeah, I mean, Bianca has been the one booed by just pure default. Having no real heels in that whole program has really, really sucked. Speaking of heels, we have new heel tag team champions as the New Day got the victory over the War Raiders here. The New Day coming out with the Giant Gonzalez blue-inspired attire. It's been really unfortunate, right? Because all the hype that was on that New Day turn, and they've just been generic heels. And even this program has not felt like the biggest program in the world. Definitely the SmackDown tag team side of things has been way more focused on, and they're on this whole storyline thread where they're just on this like SmackDown thing where they're leading to TLC matches. I don't know what's going on there, but you got New Day on the main card. People not very happy with them, obviously, because who would be happy with them? Taking on the War Raiders. Now the War Raiders coming out with as like Clash of Clans characters, but they just look like little kids wearing costumes. They kind of looked ridiculous coming out in that stuff. They mentioned that on the broadcast, see how long it had been since New Day had a title run. And this was, for the most part, a basic title match, but you had Kofi help Xavier get the pin as he's doing the thing where he's pulling the legs down. And just like that, the new tag team champions once again are the New Day, which I don't hate. I don't think Eric and Ivar were lighting the world on fire as the Raw tag team champions. Might as well put it on the New Day, but can we give the New Day something to do if that's the case? Can we increase the focus somehow, some way? Because if not, then it's just going to feel like we're stuck here in a title change, but nothing actually happened, and we have the hill run, and nothing's come of it. You mentioned Big E. Yeah, I wanted Big E to get involved too. I don't know what was the deal really with that. The promo that he gave with all that. You thought there'd be a little more follow up to that, or if it was just used to get the New Day heat, there would at least be follow up to the New Day. I think people haven't quite moved on from that E. I think there's still a hope out there that things could be different, especially because of the way his name was invoked at the start of the Hilton. I would normally ask what's next for these guys, but there's barely a tag division on Raw. So what's next for these guys is the War Raiders. That's what's next for both of these teams. Likely would be each other. Oh yeah, Fraxium did drop the titles earlier today. Good looking out there, Mike. Let's talk about the opener, which is also, I think, the other main event of the night. Finally, this is the match that I think had the longest build of all of WrestleMania because it's been building since the night of the Royal Rumble. And it was controversial then. It's been controversial leading in. I know in this chat, there are some people that have great passions towards Jey Uso and Gunther, and some that are indifferent and don't care. Jey Uso has some of the most passionate fans you'll find on the internet. And there's some people who think he can do no right and has never had a good match. It's wild. This build suffered from the length of time between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. There was a few weeks longer than extra. There was less shows in between in terms of major PLEs than there normally is. So this was just straight build for a long time. And for a little while, it was build with Theory and Waller. And then you had the recent serious turn with Gunther really beating up Jimmy. And I think that's where at least the feud got back to a bit of a refocus. But a lot of the criticisms of this WrestleMania have to do with this match maybe not being the biggest possible match or as big as it could be, and where that left night one of WrestleMania. After all, it was not a title match. It was not either of the title matches, either the Rumble winners that was to carry this night. It was the triple threat. Oh, well. So you want to talk about pressure? I don't think anyone was under more pressure maybe than Tiffany on this night to deliver than Jey Uso, because the die has already been kind of cast for him that this wasn't his spot to get it done. And if you were not okay with his Rumble win, you were sure not going to be okay with him getting the title here. But let's talk about how it played out. No surprise here that Jey was the first one out. You had the Yeet flags coming out and a huge spectacle, I should say, of an entrance. Jey was a little subdued, and they made mention of it, which is fine. I think people are asking for a more serious Jey, which is kind of hard to do when the biggest thing about the character is this massive entrance that he has. but it was subdued in the way that he's here for a job. He's got a job to do. He has to win this title to do this important thing. They're making mention of it on commentary. He's 0-6 in title matches. Will this be the time when the tide turns? We got a nice honoring of the Saudis here because it was early in the show. And then Gunther got his standard entrance. Lots of domination by Gunther to start, with little spurts of Jay's offense. Every time Jay would get a spurt of offense, though, it was a big flurry and it would like knock Gunther off his feet. But it was a lot of Gunther bringing the offense. At one point, though, the match starts picking up as Gunther goes out of the ring to kind of leave and then to grab the belt, and then nails Jay with it when the referee is distracted. Jay ends up kicking out. It was like a flying headbutt move that Gunther did. Jay ends up kicking out of all of them. Eventually, Jay finds himself locked in the sleeper again, the one that he's been locked in the last couple of weeks, the one that all the brutality was done to Jimmy on. But Jay gets to his feet by chopping Gunther and smiling, and then they kind of go into a bit of a strong style section of the match where they're just smacking each other, Jay's hitting a clothesline on Gunther, reverses a power bomb into his power bomb of his own. And that's where it's starting to kind of pick up, where it's like, no matter what you do to Jay, he's coming and he's coming and he's coming. You have this scenario where Jay gets in all his offense. He gets a super kick, a spear, a splash, and then another splash. But that wasn't it. Jay then goes into the sleeper, and then all of a sudden, Gunther taps. Jay wins. Jay's the new champion, and Jimmy's out there to congratulate. Whoa. I wasn't on a Monday, so I didn't make any official picks. I probably would have picked Jay in the end because I thought that you still, despite my misgivings about some of the build, that you weren't going to put him in this position to beat him. That felt a little Booker T-ish, and I just didn't know that they necessarily wanted to do that. But I could have definitely seen Gunther winning this match. Seeing Gunther tap, and as you mentioned in the chat earlier, that quickly, that I did not see. It was a nice bit of surprise. You don't think of Jey Uso as getting these big wins with submission. You don't think of Gunther as tapping out. You don't think of a lot of main eventers as tapping out. Something that in the like the ruthless aggression era they really went away from. That was shocking in that moment that was the case. Again, his victory is not necessarily shocking. The Royal Rumble victory, much more shocking than him getting a victory tonight. The Royal Rumble win was more shocking. But the way they did it with the tap out, just did not see that coming. And it wasn't, as you pointed out earlier, it wasn't the dramatic long taps that we're used to where they're in it for a while. There's drama about getting to the ropes and all that. This was pretty much, once he got it locked in. It was there for a little bit, and then he tapped. So the match was a very basic beginning, but when it got cooking, it was like super entertaining. It took a little bit to get cooking, and I don't think it ever hit like a fifth gear, but it was an entertaining enough title match with a pretty interesting finish. That finishing sequence I thought got really, really good. If anything, the finishing sequence might have felt a little anticlimactic and out of nowhere just because the tap happened out of nowhere, and I don't think people thought that was happening. But after this build, they need to reset the title scene. We saw what happened in the main event, and it seems like you have another main eventer right there, a heel main eventer, and it's not as ridiculous as like Jay feuding with Roman right now. Wouldn't make any sense. That's not something we need. Jay and Seth Rollins seems like it makes all the sense of the world to me right now. So if you want to make this Jay win feel bigger, if you want to make this title feel bigger, after all, part of the build in this thing wasn't in the main event because of Jey Uso, then I think your newly minted made guy from the main event later in the show needs to be the guy that feuds with Jay going forward. WWE has to make a choice. Like, what is this title going to be? And, Seth is maybe not the guy to legitimize this title because he's already been given that task once and he wasn't very good at it the last time. But I think his presence can definitely help elevate it opposite of Gunther because like the Jay Gunther Waller theory universe that we lived in the last couple of months was just extreme icy. It was just icy level with a nice coat of paint on it. We already have mid card titles in this company. These are supposed to be main event titles. Now it's ridiculous that this title exists in the first place with all the unification they've done with the other title. It is what it is. If it's going to exist, it might as well be treated a little more prestigious than it is. Now, that might be a little bit of an oxymoron with a guy like Jey Uso as the champion because one of the criticisms of him that maybe he can't carry himself like a single champion. It's all in the follow-up, guys. That's the key. I think people might have said that about Kofi Kingston. And despite the way Kofi's reign ended very unceremoniously to Brock on that SmackDown, Kofi carried himself like a champion, and that title reign was good. This title reign can work if they make it work. It's up to them. They cannot portray him the way they did Rey Mysterio in 2006 and make it seem like he was just so fortunate to have won the title. Now they've leaned in with such super underdog vibes going into this. That's how are they going to undo it? You know, my analogy might be similar to like an NBA team. Maybe this year's Boston Celtics. Now that the Celtics won a title last year, it kind of feels like they're just going to win the title every year. That they're that good, that they're that capable. Now you figured out how to win. Can you apply that same kind of concept with Jey Uso? Where suddenly, like, yeah, he can win these big matches. That's what he's doing. Mike said it would add more power if Jey went full aggressive with the sleeper. That would be something if he starts incorporating that into his game. It's a tough thing with Jey because the thing that makes him so over is the fun-loving personality and the entrance and all that. And sometimes that's antagonistic to a main event title spot. But I think, again, if the focus is being in that main event title slot, they can make both work. They can translate both into that. I'm not willing to give up on Jey, although I pretty much wanted to throughout this build because they were not giving you any reason to invest in him the way it was being presented. I'm pretty sure that would be a win for the guy who makes the other guy pass out. I think that's usually how that works in wrestling and most combat sports. Definitely, Michael. The Jimmy attack turned this into a feud again. Made this important. I don't think anyone was done any favors with this build though. So that's why I'm proposing you really merge these two main events, the two big matches together to make something meaningful out of this title and out of this reign. A lot of people are saying, and you guys have been saying in the chat, that transitional champion, he doesn't have to be. I think that's the likelihood. He doesn't have to be. If he is a transitional champion, though, and we're talking about it on the night he wins the title, who does he transition to? That's my question to you guys. Who is he keeping the belt warm for? Is it for Seth Rollins? Is it for Roman Reigns? Is it for a CM Punk? Is it for an LA Knight? Is it for a Jacob Fatu? Actually, it wouldn't be for either one of those two guys. Is it for one of the guys in the IC title match? Someone who might not walk out of there with the belt. I don't think it's going to be for Dom, but the other three in the match definitely seem like candidates of people that they could face soon on. In particular, Braun Breaker. Kind of feels like he might be able to lose his title this weekend without being pinned and get promoted up to the top spot. Just a thought. What's up, Maddie? Is based on your time zone? Are you in your holiday yet? You liked it, Matt? Congratulations, Matt. Congrats for hitting your holiday, bud. I'm really proud of you. Going forward here, it's interesting because what do we think of that show? I thought the main event was excellent, Maddie. Going into that main event, my takeaway of this night was like this night's been okay. There's been nothing bad, but it just did not feel like a WrestleMania to me. It did not nothing before that main event had, I wouldn't even say didn't have WrestleMania feel, just didn't have like big fight feel to it. I I think that the main event changed that. The main event had a major storyline implication. It was well executed. There was drama, there was question. There was a lot of those things that don't necessarily make the best of wrestling shows necessarily, but usually that sort of take away WrestleMania feeling. And I guess if the heels win on the first night, it's it's a little dicey if it doesn't connect to the next night. And this is a new territory we're in. We've only been about 5 years of the of the 2 night WrestleMania. And again, when you have, even and it connected to the story, but when you have a big babyface win, like you did, like you've had with Bianca Belair, like you've had with Sammy and KO, there's sort of that you leave them home, send them home happy. A little bit weird when you just end with a heel win on night one, because you wonder what does that portend for night two? Because I think all of these things are connected. Well, it's in Vegas, Matt. That's a possibility. They are in Vegas. I haven't watched the WrestleMania 9 documentary. I think I'll do that tomorrow before the show. But leaving on, I think, an intriguing but sour note, kind of makes you think about what's going to happen tomorrow night. You take two results tonight that could give you some indication. Was the feel good moment of the weekend Jimmy winning that, or it's gonna be Jay winning the title because Cena's walking out of there with the belt? Are you gonna have to send the fans home happy with the Cody victory, although he got booed last night, to make up for night one? I don't know. Given the build of Cody and Cena, I don't see any way John Cena does not walk out there with the belt tomorrow night. There's just no way I've hated this build. I've been on record. I think the build has been terrible for Cody Cena. Um, build for this WrestleMania has been terrible overall. I think we're gonna get ourselves a decent enough show. We've had a decent enough show tonight, and we'll probably get a pretty good show tomorrow night. But it's not been great leading in. But with that said, I think that build really points to Cena leaving or getting the title and defending from there, and what you got to do at Backlash and Orton and all of that. So I don't know. Cena wins. RVD. You know what? I would love for RVD to come frog splash Cena after, get him back for 2006. That might be the day. That might be the day. All right, guys. I've been going for about an hour and a half. I think we'll talk tomorrow night, just like we did tonight. No pre-show tomorrow. No post-show Monday night, but we will have a hell of a WrestleMania recap of both nights, but in particular, night 2 tomorrow. So for now, everyone, go ahead, get your rest, get your takes in, start doing your star ratings, start being ready for your takes for tomorrow night, because I will see you same place, same time tomorrow. Take it easy, everyone.